Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Firelight Chat. We're going to be talking about Gen Z economics in this episode. You know, I'm a mother, and like most parents, most caretakers of children, that colors and pervades everything in my life. And I've had a very strong feeling about America's children and America's young people for quite a while, because it seems to me like there's a neglect here, a systemic neglect that has taken crisis proportions. Other times we talk about children, but what we're going to talk about tonight is Gen Z. You know, I feel about an entire generation what I feel about my own child. You give them the opportunity to succeed. That's what it seems to me society should be doing, setting our young people up to win. But in policy after policy, whether it has to do with healthcare, whether it has to do with tuition costs, whether it has to do with housing, there are so many ways in which public policy actually thwarts rather than supports the dreaming and the self-actualization of America's young. You know, a couple of months ago, I spoke at Cambridge University in England, and I was struck by a feeling there of hope among the young people and a sense of possibility and their lives ahead of them and an excitement about it that too often I do not feel here, and I do not hear it here. And I wanted tonight to give you the opportunity to hear the kinds of stories, hear the experiences of some young people, because they are so indicative of the kinds of stories and the kinds of things that I hear everywhere I go throughout this country. So these are three people, but know that for each story that you hear in this Firelight Chat, there are probably millions more who would say pretty much the same thing. We're going to be talking to Thomas Beardsley. He's 23 years old. He recently graduated from the University of South Carolina with a major in sociology and a minor in business administration. He currently works as a Domino's driver on Daniel Island. He has lived in Charleston for his entire life. We'll also hear my new friend Skylar Hollinsworth. She is 22 years old. She's an esthetician. She will be going back to school in the fall for a career change, which you'll hear about. And she was also born and raised in South Carolina. And then we have Andrew Holt, again, 23 years old. Andrew has been working full-time and living on his own since he was 17. He's worked in jobs like retail management and food and beverages. And he's also an artist. He does graphic design and is working to start his own business. To all of you, thank you. Thank you for being with me, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start with you, Andrew. Tell us your story.
Well, right out of high school, I ended up having to work full time. I was dating someone at the time that was working in a restaurant, and I had anxiety about her living on her own and me not being there. So I started working full time right out of high school at 17, and I was working 40 hours a week, and we had 4 roommates, and it was hard to maintain that alone with 4 people. After that, I lived in that apartment, and I ended up in retail management. I managed 2 smoke shops for about 5 years, and working there, I wasn't able to afford a place to live without having at least 3 roommates. And that was in retail management. I managed 2 stores in Charleston, and I worked there for half a decade. And the owner of the business, she wasn't willing to pay an affordable wage while I was working there, after I had told her countless times that I needed a livable wage in order to just have my own place. It shouldn't be acceptable that I was living with 4 people and I was getting by. And then after that, I met Skylar, and me and her ended up moving in together shortly after that. And I ended up leaving that job, and I worked at a advertising agency for a short period before they outsourced an employee, and they told me they couldn't afford my salary anymore. So they fired me. After that, I worked at a restaurant serving, and I worked 2 jobs. I worked at 2 different restaurants so that me and her could maintain the house that we lived in. And we were living in downtown, and the cost of living in downtown Charleston is ridiculous. It's more than one, and it's more than 2 people can afford. And I switched from working 80 hours between 2 jobs to just working the one. I currently work at a pizza shop, and the cost of living got too much. So I'm currently living with my mother, and I realized that I'm not going to make it anywhere working constantly every day, open to close at a business. I need to make my own way. So I'm working to start my own business right now, but I still have to work 50, 60 hours a week in order to do that, in order to save up for the things that I need. But that's where
Okay. So let's go back to the beginning. When you first left high school and you said you started working at 17, did you think about going to college or tech school? Did you want to go to college or tech school?
Initially I did, but my dad was very much a you need to work type person. He didn't really encourage me to go to college. So I didn't even think of it. And I didn't have a solid career path. And I had this idea in my head that I didn't want to be drowned in student loan debts because my grades weren't good enough to where I could afford to pay my way through college.
Right.
So I ended up just working full time right out of high school.
Okay, so let's talk some numbers. In that first, I'm going to get my calculator here so I'll have an idea of what any of this means. So when you first, these jobs that you've been talking about, what has been your pay at these jobs?
My starting pay as a retail manager of those two locations at the smoke store that I worked at, I was making initially $11 an hour, and that was working 40 to 50 hours a week. And after working there for 5 years and like bullying the owner verbally into paying me more, I got to a point where I was managing two of her stores right around when I was like 21 or 22 is when I left. So I was there for a while. But near the end of working there, she didn't even live in the same city as me. None of the other employees of her other locations lived in the same city. So I was responsible for two of her locations, and I was making 15 an hour, working 50 hours a week.
Okay, so wait, you started at 11 and then went up to 15?
Yeah, and she told me that she couldn't pay me more than 15.
Okay, do you know what a living wage is in Charleston?
The average apartment in Charleston now is somewhere in the realm of like $1,700 for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, give or take. So a living wage for one person to be able to afford a 1-bed, 1-bath apartment by themselves and to be able to feed and clothe themselves and get to work, it would probably have to be in the realm of like $20 an hour or more.
Okay. So after that job, where'd you go?
After that job, I got a temporary job. It became temporary, but it was at an advertising agency. And they initially ended up giving me about $40,000 a year. And I was a contracted employee, so I had to pay my taxes at the end of the year. And I only worked there for a few months before they informed me that they had found another employee that was willing to work for about half the salary as me. So they ended up telling me that they needed to let me go.
Now, you're in a situation now where you're living with your mom.
Yeah, I'm living with my mom and my older brother right now.
Okay. You and Skylar had tried to live together?
Yeah, we did.
In Charleston? And yeah, go on, Skylar.
Initially, when we moved in, it was because he got this job and we thought it was going to be big. So we knew downtown was expensive, but we wanted to be on our own and enjoy our experience together. So that was why we moved out, was because of his job. And I had started my pretty decently paying job for Charleston, but we ended up being severely financially punished once he got let go.
Skylar, go back a little bit and tell me about your story. Tell me about your story after you left high school.
So I left high school and I had the opportunity to go to university, but I chose not to, just because I knew I did not have the resources to be financially taken care of while I was in college. And I didn't receive enough in scholarship to be able to afford to survive and attend college. So I chose the trade route, and my ultimate goal was to start working once I finished my trade immediately and then pay my own way through school. So I would be able to work part-time and then go to school at a university. Unfortunately, that did not work out because I was unable to even, with the job I had in the trade I specialized in as an esthetician, I was not able to provide for myself without paying paycheck to paycheck. There was no saving. It was just surviving. So I was not able to save to go to university and live on my own.
How much were you making as an esthetician?
So my first job was probably my best paying job, which was 30%. I was making 30% commission off of my tickets. However, it's difficult because you start off with no clients. So you have to build up your clients. And I luckily did build up my clientele. But you learn in this industry that people get traded out almost once you start making too much, almost. Where if you build too much of a clientele, sometimes they will let you go before you're too high in demand, to where customers might leave if you leave. It's almost like you become a threat in the industry. After that, I found a job and I was working at a spa. It was a facial spa. And I had the most experience out of anyone, including my manager. I was on a year and a half of experience, and I was offered 14 an hour. And everyone else was making 11 an hour. Unfortunately, I had to pay for parking to be able to get to work because this was a business downtown. And parking was $22 to $25 a day for my shifts. So I was losing most of my tips in parking. I wasn't getting compensated. And there is no parking, there is no public transportation, and there is no free parking downtown. So you have to pay.
Mm-hmm. So you were at that time, you were what, living with roommates?
I was living with Andrew.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then that became something that neither you could not financially afford, right? And that's when Andrew went back to live with his mom. And what are you doing now? Where are you living now?
I am living with my grandparents. My parents were never an option for me to live with. So I knew that going forward from high school. I am grateful to have my grandparents and I help them out as well. But I'm able to save now and I can go back to school, which was really my intention all along. So.
And when you go back to school, what are you going to be studying?
I plan to study pathology or microbiology.
And is there a particular reason why you want to study pathology and microbiology?
So it ties in with an illness I was born with. I was born with mastocytosis. It's an autoimmune disease, and it basically causes you to mass produce cells in your body. It's almost kind of similar to cancer. It's not malignant, but there are masses growing in your bone marrow. They're growing in your organs, and it causes osteoporosis, a lot of different kinds of chronic pain, and it does sometimes cause mast cell leukemia when it's systemic. And I recently found out that I do have systemic mastocytosis. So I realized, because of the aesthetics industry, which I do love, I really do love, but I would never be able to take care of myself because they do not offer insurance to anyone in the cause industry.
You told me that you have osteoporosis already in your life, correct?
Yes.
23 with osteoporosis. Is
Yes.
it moderate? Is it severe? Is it?
So it's moderate but can be severe depending on what I'm doing. So if I'm running or doing a lot of exercise, I have to take a lot of vitamins, but there's not really that much treatment. Once your bones are frail, there's not much you can do. So I went a while without knowing. There's a lot of prevention, but it's a hard autoimmune to diagnose. So I had no idea. I did know I was born with mastocytosis, but we were not educated on what could happen if it became systemic.
So you are on your parents' health insurance right now, your mom's health insurance?
So I'm on my stepdad's health insurance.
And that is until you're 26?
26, yes.
And if you go to school this year and you're 23, what what theoretically will you be doing for health insurance? How will this work?
So basically what would happen is I would have to pay out of pocket when I'm finishing up school. It would probably be my last year or two of school that I would have no insurance. That would basically be where I would be at. It's just not being able to get any testing done, any medicine, any treatment. Which is why I'm going into this field, so I can get the insurance, hopefully, eventually.
Thomas Beardsley, tell us about you.
Okay, so I was born here in 2000. My dad was in the Air Force. He flew C-17s. And he was in the Air Force for until about 2015. So for a good, period of my early childhood, there was a lot of months where there was a good amount of time where sometimes he just would be away for like a month or two. He also flew for Delta Airlines, and he still does because he was in the reserves. So thankfully, we never really had to move around the country. But like when we were younger, like the airlines, like there was less pay and everything, and like things we actually did have some times where we struggled a little bit, but overall I would say like we've had a decently comfortable life up until that point. And we're doing all right for ourselves now, and a big part of it is due to my father's seniority within Delta Airlines, and also a big part of it is there is a very powerful union at the company that has pretty much strong-armed the company into providing better pay and benefits. And it's allowed me and my family to be able to be all right, which I feel like my situation and like Andrew and everyone's here is kind of like represents almost the dynamic of Charleston. There's people who are well off, and then there's people who are scraping to get by. And when you are already scraping to get by, it just like I've known Andrew since 8th grade now, and I've seen him go through all the things that he talked about. And I've always just wondered, it's like, why is it that someone who's just simply born to different parents or born into a different family, has to struggle inherently? Like, where is like the justice in that? So I recently finished college. I was able to get through relatively debt free with through via scholarships, which helped a lot, and I'm very thankful for that overall. I'm not really certain what I feel like where I want to go in my life at the moment. I'm living back at home now in Charleston. My mom passed away from pancreatic cancer back in March,
Oh, I'm
so I'm kind
sorry.
of just trying to be here for my dad. Yeah, it was a journey, but we got to spend time with her and be there with her, and it's better in some ways than like some people who just lost a parent just suddenly. We had some time to get some closure there. I
Got
don't
your
know, like
degree
sorry, go on.
in, what was it, sociology? What was it? Sociology and a minor in business. And
Yes,
now
ma'am.
you're working in Domino's Pizza. So explain to me, with a degree in business and sociology, what are your dreams? Where do you feel you want to go with that?
So at the moment, the reason why I'm working at Domino's is because, well, as I said, like it's been a pretty rough few years with everything. So I'm trying to take some time for myself in some ways. I'm considering maybe volunteering with the Peace Corps in the coming years, and I really want to maybe go to some type of Latin American country, because for about 3 years when I was in college, I was minoring in Spanish. And I'm nearing fluency. I wouldn't say I'm like fully fluent yet. However, I feel like I really want to develop that skill more, and it's kind of a central part of my like core morals and like philosophy that there are people in this world who are far less fortunate than myself, and like I almost feel like I have an obligation to do what I can to try to help them and to improve others' lives if I can, I suppose. I just feel like I want to know that, like, at the end of my life, that I at least tried to make the world a
Well,
better place
between the
than it
fact
is
that you
now,
did come from a level of privilege and the fact that you have a degree in sociology, which gives you a deeper understanding of what's happening, and business administration, which gives you a more expanded capacity to help with what's happening, you're set up to do great things. Absolutely. Do you have siblings?
Yes, ma'am. I have one sister.
Okay.
She's about 4 years older than me. It was just me and my sister throughout my life. So
So where does your
my
sister live?
She currently lives up in Greenville, but she's been living back home in Charleston with us for the past couple months because she's trying to she's doing like trials and stuff like that for medical stuff. She's
Oh,
trying to
that's
work
beautiful.
with disabled children because she
So,
has a pretty similar
yeah.
philosophy.
So the reason I asked is
to me in
because if
that
you go
way.
off to Latin America and your mom just died, your dad will be at home alone. I wanted to think your dad would still have somebody there with him. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go on. You were going to say something?
yeah. It's oh, sorry. Yeah, it's like he's going to be going back to pilot training relatively soon, but like, there's a lot of he's trying to like, make sure that he's in like a decent place after everything that's happened. So like this is something else that I wanted to touch on about like a kind of the feeling of just like unfairness. So it was 2 years. March 2021 is when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. The thing is, my dad actually had colon cancer about 2 years before then. He thankfully is completely cancer free now. But during that time, he has not gone to work very much in the past 4 years. However, he's been receiving a full salary due to this. And I don't know of almost anyone else who is in a position where they can do that. And it's just kind of like, just seeing like, the ability of, my own family to like take that extensive of like sick leave to help people. But then I know so many people who just, they're like, the Skylar here is good. Like, she's got osteoporosis, and it's just like, what kind of options does she have for, taking medical leave and trying to like improve her situation with that? It's just, I and like I can only like feel like I can thank the union for that in a lot of ways. It's just I can only imagine where we would be like if we didn't have
unions.
that.
No kidding. And then you see people like Sarah Nelson. There's some real heroes in the unions having to do with airlines, of course. Andrew, let's go back to you. At 23, you've already had a kind of, you've worked hard, more than one job, trying to make it. I want to know two things from you. First of all, you said you want to start your own business. You feel you're talented as an artist. Do you need any kind of training having to do with graphic arts, et cetera, or are you just one of these people who knows what to do and you pick it up? What will it take for you to go forward from here and get into that field of graphic art?
Well, my business is primarily going to be focused on assisting like churches with like technical help.
That's cool.
And because both sides of my family, they grew up in the church. I'm not a very religious person, but that is a group of people that are incredibly lacking in technical help and graphic design help.
Okay.
And that's something that my grandfather told me because he's a pastor, and my uncle he did something very similar with the church, and he is fully retired at 40 because it's a lot of graphic design companies, they don't specifically reach out to churches because they don't assume that they need the help. Normally they'll reach out to small businesses, they'll reach out to restaurants, they'll reach out to
I understand
everyone other than churches. So that's what I wanted to do. As far as the help that I might need or any sort of knowledge or education that I might need, a majority of it is stuff that I already know fairly well.
Sort of self-taught?
Yeah, self-taught and things that I picked up in high school in my media tech class. And after that, I was self-taught in video editing. And that's what I did for the that's what I did for the advertising agency I worked for. I was a video editor with them. So the majority of the work is stuff I already know. It's just a matter of getting it rolling and reaching out.
So at 23, you're on your way.
I'm doing my best. I feel as though that it is something that if I had the motivation and I didn't feel this overwhelming sense of hopelessness and dread, that I would have been able to accomplish years ago. It's something that I definitely could have done years ago, but I didn't. I just put myself in a 9-to-5 and just kept going to work. And I was like, this is going to be my life.
Okay. I want to ask, I'm sorry, you want to say something, Skylar?
I would just say that one of the things that's mainly been a struggle is to start his business. We had to sell his computer to pay our rent while we were living downtown. So he is now having to work 50 to 60 hours and not paying rent. He's living with his mother, and he's having to build his computer again because he needs that's how he works. That's how he would run his business. So right now he's been in the process of building a new computer so he can do his work.
Yeah,
So
That's
that
been a
is
struggle.
a big
Sorry.
thing.
we have a woman who believes in you, and that's a big deal, Andrew. So
That's
let's go back a little bit. You got out of high school. If
Yes.
America was the land of your dreams, what would have been available to you when you got out of high school?
If America was the land of dreams that I wanted it to be, I would be able to pick up a small part-time job making at least 22 an hour. I
Okay.
wouldn't have to pay for my health care. I wouldn't, or at least, a baseline health care. I am entitled to free health care. I feel like every young person is entitled, every person in America is entitled to free health care. I feel like there should have been more motivation in just like my personal life. That would have been nice. But free healthcare would have been nice.
Yeah, because the government can't give you the motivation part. But I'll have a couple things to say in a minute about that 22 an hour and the universal health care. So go on.
Yeah, and then more assisted programs for paying for school would have been cool.
If you had, let me ask you a question. If you had tuition-free college or tech school, do you think you would have taken advantage of it?
If I had completely tuition-free tech school or college, I probably would have taken it. But on top of all of that, I mean, I grew up poor. My family's not really one to help me in any of my financial situations. I've been making it on my own since I was 17. So even if I got into a college for free, I would still, travel, food, lodging, working. That's something I would have to pay out of pocket for myself. So
yeah, but if you had tuition-free college or tuition-free tech school, and you might have gone in the direction of graphic arts and all of that,
I would have gone.
Yeah. Okay, so a little Marianne here. So this is the deal. When you hear the stories of Andrew, of Skylar, and we'll talk a little bit more to Skylar as well about her specific circumstances. When you're talking about Andrew, let's just take Andrew's situation, and also Thomas, because Thomas represents really basically 20% of Americans who can afford to help their kids. Now, I want to say something here. In the 1970s, the average American could afford a house, could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation, could afford for one parent to stay home, and could afford to send their kids to college. That was the average American back in the 1970s. It's only 20% of Americans for whom that is true now. So what I find very touching about what Thomas has said is that he recognizes his privilege, and he recognizes how fortunate he is, and he recognizes the luck of his birth lottery, as it were. We all, I'm sure I represent everybody who's listening right now, and my condolences to Thomas, having lost his mother. Life still happens, but in terms of his material circumstances and his material opportunities, he is aware. And what he has now, he got the degree in sociology, he got the degree in business administration. His family you can feel when someone is buffered enough. And then you hear someone, and Thomas will be okay. The issue that we're talking about here is, why shouldn't it be more universal, the opportunities for people to thrive? So what Andrew is saying is, if you're making $11 an hour, even $14 an hour in Charleston, but the living wage is over 20%, and in South Carolina, only 38% of the jobs pay a living wage, you get this kind of sense of people that's happening all over the place, which is this kind of hopelessness. So nobody can listen to Andrew, who has been speaking to us for a few minutes now. Nobody can say that Andrew's not trying. Nobody can say that Andrew's not out there working. But what are we doing as a society? So how would Andrew's path to the age of 23 already been had he had universal health care? Had he had a $22 an hour living wage? Now, when we talk about my economic bill of rights, what we call the Marianne plan, you've got universal health care. That's what I want these kids to have. I want these kids to be set on, not that the people on this program are kids, but when I think of young people, I think what we should do as a country is set people up to win. And I was saying to some young people on a program earlier today, I don't even want you to have to worry about healthcare. I don't want Andrew to have to worry about healthcare. And I definitely don't want Skylar to have to worry about healthcare. And I don't want any American young person to have to worry about healthcare or college costs. So Andrew, you're going to be just fine, by the way, because there's a lot of character in you and in Skylar, and you guys are going to make it. I have no doubt about that. And, there's something really beautiful here. And you've both got what it takes. But it shouldn't be so hard in the richest country in the world. So all that we're saying is if you have universal health care, if you have tuition-free college and tech school, and you have a guaranteed living wage, look how Andrew's path would be different at this point. Now, as it is, Andrew's having to live with his parents, you said, Andrew? Skylar's having his mother, and Skylar's living with her grandparents. And the point is here, at 23, Skylar and Andrew want to be living together. They obviously love each other. Let these people get started in life. So I think that the point for me when I hear Andrew's story is, how would things be different if he had universal health care, if there was that $22 an hour, a living wage? And I hope that you will look on the website at Marianne2024.com, look at the 21st Century Economic Bill of Rights, because once again, let's get these things really clear. Universal health care, a guaranteed living wage, tuition-free college, and tech school. Because the thing is, you invest in your young people, you invest in your citizens, then they'll go out and thrive. I don't think anybody listening to Andrew or Thomas or Skylar today doesn't get that this younger generation of Americans has what every younger generation has. They have dreams, they have desire, they have capacity, they're ready to go. They're ready to self-actualize. But there's too much going on in this society that is not a path forward, that is really inviting. Now, I want to go back to you, Skylar. I asked Andrew if he could go back to when he was 17 years old, what would the America of his dreams be? He said universal health care. He would have liked to have had the opportunity of college, tech school at tuition free, and he would like a guaranteed living wage. And that, I think, Andrew, what you want is what most Americans want. In fact, I know it's what most Americans want, both Democrats and Republicans. This is what the American people want. And this is what, and also I want to point it out to everybody who might not be aware of this. Not only is it what the majority of both Democrats and Republicans want in this country, it is what the citizens of every other advanced democracy have. The issue of health care, and especially in Skylar's case, and there are many Skylars out there, Skylar, the weight, too many of our young people are carrying weight that makes it very, very difficult to thrive. And then we don't even have anyone on this call today who has the college loans. And when I think of these young people in their 20s carrying tens of thousands of dollars worth of college loan debt, that is crushing. That is crippling. I don't know how I would even be making it today. So in my life, if I in my 20s had been carrying that kind of weight. So for you, Skylar, if I was to ask you, what would the America of your dreams look like? What would you wish for young people like yourself?
Well, I think that the way I was brought up, it was messy. My parents were never together, and I never had a filter on anything. I always was very hyper aware. I could not afford college. I had to get a scholarship. I had to do great in school, but I always had that drive in me. And with my siblings, they don't have that. I've even seen it. There's just some people don't have that. I'm going to take the world by the reins and I'm going to win. So I did everything right in high school. I lettered into sports. I was class president. I had a 4.4 GPA. And I think that what I wanted and what I thought was going to happen when I graduated was having the ability to create my American dream without being so disabled because of the family I come from, because I don't have resources, because I don't have help. I think what I wanted was free school. I wanted to be as long as I made the grades, I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do. I love to be educated. I love my education. I want to make a difference. And I felt like I had to work extra hard to get where I wanted. I had to go to a school I could afford and knew I would get a scholarship for fully. And I had to work my way to be able just to get my education. And then even that failed. I think that was what it was debilitating, like just to
So slow down a little bit for me here, because I don't totally
Right.
understand. You got into college after high school because you had good grades, and you
Right.
got a scholarship?
I got a partial scholarship, but it wasn't enough to
Enough. And that's why you chose to just forego it and become an esthetician instead.
Yes.
So
Yes.
now in going back to school, do you have a scholarship?
Yes, I do, but it's because I'm starting in tech and I'm going to transfer into a university, which there I most likely will have loans.
You will have what?
Loans. Student loans.
You will have the
once I
loans.
transfer. But it'll only be
Right.
2 years of the 4 degree instead of the first 2. I can get done in a tech school and then I can save that. So at least I won't carry all of those loans. But I am terrified of carrying on just the 2 years of loans that I will eventually have to carry.
So for you also, oh, wait a minute. There's loans and then there's scholarship. I thought you said you were
Right.
getting the scholarship. You'll be taking
So-
out loans in addition to that?
So in tech, I'm covered because I don't make enough and my parents don't make enough. You get school covered in tech, depending. Like my mother makes less than $17,000 a year. That's why, which is unlivable, insane, quite frankly. But because of that, I get tech school covered. It's not even about my grades. But once I go to university, if you want a bachelor's, you cannot get a bachelor's at tech. You have to go to university. So then I will have to take out loans. There might be little grants that I get, but not enough to help me in terms of paying for all of it or living or anything like that.
So with the plan that you guys have now, Andrew and Skylar, when do you foresee being able to live together again?
I would probably say, depending on where Andrew's at in terms of business, it would probably be 2 years because he would have to help me while I'm in school. Otherwise, it might not be until I finish school as well, because we would only really be able to live together if we got at least 2 more roommates.
Yeah, I would
which
have to.
defeats the purpose.
I would have to be able to financially secure everyone in the house so that she could afford to go back to school, and so that she could afford housing, her books, with the few grants that she gets. She might be able to have a part-time job, but that's if. Like we don't even know if we'd be able to afford that.
All right. Well, you might have to have a couple of roommates.
Right.
That, at your age, that is what happens. I lived in a house when I was your age with a bunch of people.
Right. I think right now it's just saving is what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Just because of inflation with everything in the housing market, like if we want to have like a set up future, we do have to kind of take this time to save if we want to be together and start something together. I think this is the best route for us.
And if things continue the way they are in Charleston, we're not going to be able to continue to live in Charleston. We don't plan to. Rent has risen every single year. The single apartment, we had a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment, and our rent was $1,650. Another big reason that we ended up leaving that apartment is because they raised the rent $600 after we left. And we, this is like a small anecdotal story, but it's on topic. I had a younger guy come into my store the other day who was talking about, he was clearly out of touch, and he had never had to work. His parents had money, and he was offering all of the employees of the pizza store rent for an apartment. He said, I have a really cool apartment. It's 2-bedroom. It's 1 bathroom. It's only 1,000 square feet, but it's an awesome deal. And it's right by where you work. And I said, oh, that sounds great. What's the rent? And he told me that the rent was $3,500, as if we could afford it. He seemed hopeful that we would say yes to $3,500. And then I asked him, I sort of laughed and I said, well, what do you pay on the mortgage? And then he followed that up with, oh, we've owned it since the 80s. We only have to pay property taxes. We don't have a mortgage. So I said, what was the rent last year? And he said it was $1,700. So I asked him why they raised the rent that high. And he just goes, oh, because, we can. His answer was essentially because we can. And I was like, that is the most evil, greedy thing I've ever heard. That is the reason people who live in this city can't afford to live in this city without 3 roommates or 2 jobs. And we're not going to be able to afford to live in Charleston if that pattern of behavior continues with privatized housing. That's not going to be a thing. We're not going to be able to afford to live here.
I hear you. Okay, so what I'm hearing from everyone is that universal health care would make a difference. I'm hearing that a living wage would make a difference. Franklin Roosevelt said that he felt that a company that did not pay a living wage did not deserve to exist in this country. A living wage, universal health care, and tuition-free college and tech school. And what we have heard from Thomas is that if you are fortunate to live in that top 20% of wage earners in this country, then your kids are brought up with enough wiggle room, that they still have the same kind of questioning and who am I and what am I going to do with my life. That's just part of becoming, the maturation process and the individuation process. But there's a sense of, even though I might not be able to figure it out, I know that the society itself, there's a sense of he's got enough support to make it all come true. When it comes to Andrew and Skylar, they've got the same stuff inside them that Thomas has. I think all the 3 people who spoke to us today, they have the brains, they have the God-given potential, but there's a sense of weight on Skylar and Andrew that young people should not have to have. I understand about being young and just making it and having to live with roommates and stuff. I had all that. I mean, our generation certainly had that as well. But what I sense in Andrew and in Skylar that's different than what I had when I was their age is a sense that, the society has give. And what they're talking about now with rents being so high and so forth, it's too hard. It shouldn't be this hard for our young people. I don't mind the fact that they have to work hard. I don't mind the fact that, they have to live with roommates. That kind of stuff is just part of being young sometimes. But there should be universal health care in this country. And both Democrats and Republicans agree about that. And they have that in every other advanced democracy. When I spoke at Cambridge in England and I pointed out that in the United States, people have to ration their insulin, people looked at me in disbelief. They couldn't even believe it. And what both Skylar and Andrew have talked about is wages. When Andrew was talking about working 2 jobs full time, he's talking about working 40, 50, 80 hours a week, and he's worked for $11 an hour. These are not livable wages. These are starvation wages. This is not the way America should be. And when he's talking about the fact that rent is so high and that it keeps going up and it's getting to the point, and this is happening everywhere in the United States, these people all come from this area and they're being pushed out. They're being pushed out of Charleston. They're being pushed out of the cool places, the chic places to live because people cannot afford it. It's just not a direction we can afford to go as a society. So this is why these things need to change. I have no doubt that all of you are going to be fine. And I think that it's really important. I'm really grateful that you spoke to us because you all you're the young people of America. And you have what it takes. But I also hear, I'm sorry about your mom, Thomas. And for you, Skylar and Andrew, if I'm president of the United States, when I'm president of the United States, we will be on the way to getting you that universal health care. And we will be on our way to getting the tuition-free college and tech school. This should just not be the burden that you have to carry. And you should have a living wage, and that should be guaranteed. So I hope that you'll help me. I hope all of you will help with this movement and the creation of this possibility, because that's what's going to have to happen. We are now living at a point in our society where it's baked into the cake that the things we're talking about right here are not going to change. And people say, oh, we're making incremental changes and we'll get there. No, we won't, because the corporatist dominance of our government is such that they have no intention of really making it all the way to universal health care. And they've had plenty of opportunities to raise the minimum wage. They can't even get to 15. And that was with Democrats, with the House and the Senate and the White House. And as Andrew said, living wage, as it is in most American major cities, is above 20. We all know what's happening. This country belongs in too many ways to just a few, and this country needs to belong to all of us. So, Andrew, Skylar, Thomas, do any of you have anything else you'd like to add before we take leave of one another?
I had something that I kind of wanted to say. It's like,
okay,
the position that, like, like I was born into and everything, it's like a lot of that's the reason I was bringing up the union and everything like that, because like my family like did not earn what we have through like landlording and like a bit owning a business and like exploiting other people. It was through sheer sweat and work and being like a very particular skilled type of worker. And
right.
I feel like this is a representation of what the American dream is supposed to be. However, like it should not be like cordoned off to like only those who have a very particular set of skills and like happen to like have like been trained those skills due to like being in the military or something. It's something that like back in like like you were saying, like the 80s and the 70s and stuff like that, someone could actually like support themselves off like just kind of a more lower level job in some ways, you know what I mean? And it's just like you shouldn't have to like go to the Air Force Academy and then like go through all these years, like the 20 years of like flying for like an airline just to get to a point where you feel like you can support your kids. That's completely absurd.
Why a lot of us feel defeated, because we're working hard, we're working really hard, and we're not getting anywhere. We're struggling and we're just surviving. And it's like, I don't know what more I can do, what I can give, because I'm working myself to the bone, and so is my boyfriend. I'm watching my boyfriend work 2 jobs just to help pay the rent with me, split it with me, and pay our bills. And it defeats you, and you're like, well, I'll just pack it up and go home, I guess, so I can maybe make it this way. But I understand what you're saying. It's like it feels almost select, like very niche. I can't join the military. I have osteoporosis, but I should still be able to make my American dream, even though it's not going to look like everyone else's. I should still be able to just not ask for a lot, just the basic necessities. I don't want some big house or anything like that. I just want enough to be able to be happy and well established and feel like I'm a part of my community rather than sweating and struggling.
Yeah, and I don't feel like I should have to resort to going, well, I need to open my own business, because this is the only way I am not going to feel hopeless. The only way I'm not going to feel hopeless is to be a boss and have employees. You should be able to go to work at a 9-to-5 job, come home, and be able to afford your housing, afford your food, afford for whoever's living in your house to be able to live there. I should not. My last resort was, okay, well, I mean, I guess I need to start my own business, because this is the only way that I'm going to get out of this like pit of just sadness and helplessness that I'm currently in.
Well, I hear you, and your owning your own business does not mean necessarily that you will have employees. You might just choose to be a single contractor and do fine. Mm-hmm. I hear everything you're saying, and I know you're going to be fine. It's interesting, because you were saying you should not have to, and all of you have said this, and I think this is the thing. I think anybody watching would say about all of you, these kids are great. They have everything it takes. They're attractive. They're smart. They'll make it. They'll be fine. What are we complaining about? My sense is that you shouldn't have to be any of the things that we just said. And I think that I just said, and I think that's really what you're pointing out. You all have this kind of drive. You all have a creative, productive drive. You all have the potential of a kind of entrepreneurial spirit that I, at my age, can look back at you at 23 and feel confident that you guys are going to be fine. You should have universal health care. You should have tuition-free college and tech school, and you should have a guaranteed living wage. But the issue I'm more concerned about is young people who do not have the inherent stuff that you guys have. And they shouldn't have to be as hopeless as they feel as well. And that's really what I hear you saying. Wouldn't you say that, Andrew?
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
You shouldn't have to have what we have. You should be able to just want to go to work, want to go home, and be able to live comfortably.
Amen.
Everyone should be able to live a dignified life and have a dignified existence. And I feel like that's not being provided to so many in this country. And like, well, you were talking about like how like in England there's a certain sense of optimism about the future. Almost every single person my age, like they're scared about the future, like climate change. Like we don't know what's going to happen there. Our leaders are doing nothing. It feels like we've just been kind of abandoned by like the people who are supposed to like be governing this country and like supposedly like trying to bring us closer to our founding ideals, but it's just like you just watch like how little is done and just the seeming like carelessness of those in power. Like it's disheartening.
Well, you're right. Everywhere I go, I think I might have mentioned this to Skylar, I'm not sure. Everywhere I go, I ask people, is there any young person in this room, or is there any older person who's heard a young person say, under normal circumstances, I would be thinking of having children, but given the state of the planet, I don't know if it would be the responsible thing to do. And I see Skylar and Andrew and really all of you now nodding your heads. This is not normal. President Biden is consistently bragging about the investments in green energy and the Inflation Reduction Act. But first of all, they're a fraction of what we pay over 10 years even. They're a fraction of what we pay every year on the defense budget, which is the single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases. And at the same time, he can do investments in green energy, but he still approved the Willow Project and has given more oil drilling permits than even Trump did. This is the time to ramp down fossil fuel extraction, not to ramp it up. We must declare a climate emergency. And I understand you're feeling so hopeless about it. But I hope that this campaign makes you feel that there's some possibility here as well, because none of this is going to change unless we, the people, change it. And you're grown-ups now.
Simply getting to talk to you and the fact that like you're actually a proper presidential candidate who just wants to just talk to the young people like of this country about their life and their experience. Like I was talking about this, but like it really is like it does give like a sense of hope to know that there are people and like who actually have some sway who just want to know what's like the experiences and the struggles of younger people in this country are, and like our hopes, dreams, and like our fears, and that means a lot.
Well, we're living at a point where the majority of Americans do agree with you. The problem is not the people. The problem is the very sclerotic political system that is owned more by corporate powers than it is owned by the people. And legislators who do more to serve the profit motive of their donors than the health, safety, and the well-being of the American people. That's only going to change if we change it. And for those of you who agree with that, I hope you'll go to Marianne 2024 and do what you can so the change can happen. Anything else any of you want to say before we leave?
No, just vote for Marianne 2024.
Oh, that's so sweet of you, Skylar.
Yeah. I would like to say one more thing. I want your personal cell number when you become president.
Okay, well, I think I don't know if they would allow me to do that. I can give you my personal cell number now, and Skylar already has it. Later on, we'll talk, but
I'm not going to give it to him.
Well, then anything you want to tell me, tell Skylar, and she'll tell me, okay? And I hope I'll be back to Charleston soon, and I hope that I will see all of you. I would love to. I will be there. Much love to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.